You've never seen a more remarkable example of defeating the hard power of technology with brilliant mathematics. Chinese DeepSeek has outsmarted U.S. sanctions and powerful tech engines through sheer genius. But is the accusation by the American company true, that China has stolen technology? The U.S. company faced losses $900 billion in just a single day. Why? In 2022, China spent more on importing semiconductors than it did on importing oil. The U.S. imposed over 1,000 sanctions on Chinese tech companies, but China had a counter-strategy. Developing a 3-nanometer chip is a bigger leap than sending a man to the moon. Who's investing billions in U.S. AI now? Investors are weighing the profitability of U.S. companies versus Chinese startups. So, does this mean China has surpassed America? You've heard about the new model from the Chinese AI company DeepSeek, which has shaken the world of science, business, and global politics. Its model, R1, achieved for just $6 million what multi-billion-dollar American tech companies couldn't. All U.S. efforts over the last 2 decades to block China from accessing cutting-edge technologies have backfired. Hold on, my friend. You'll understand this better once we explain the background. On October 7th, 2022, the U.S. president banned global nanochip manufacturers from selling cutting-edge technologies to China. This applied especially to companies developing products with American assistance, whether they were American or non-American. He also sanctioned numerous Chinese companies, preventing them from doing business with U.S.-linked firms or engaging in certain types of trade. The primary target of these sanctions was nanochip technology. For years, the U.S. has been worried about China's growing influence in AI and has imposed sanctions to curb it. The total number of direct and indirect sanctions on China's IT industry exceeds 1,000. 532 of these sanctions target Chinese companies directly, while the rest are aimed at companies and trade agencies worldwide that assist or could assist China in selling, transferring, or manufacturing advanced chip technology. The U.S. has been determined to teach China a lesson, with every president imposing sanctions upon taking office and before leaving. Donald Trump, before losing the 2020 election, blacklisted China's key semiconductor manufacturing companies and imposed restrictions on related industries. Similarly, ahead of the December 2024 polls, Joe Biden's administration imposed new restrictions on Chinese semiconductor companies. For months, news continued to surface about the U.S. imposing sweeping sanctions on Chinese firms. Over the past 20 years, America has consistently built walls to block Chinese companies. Why? Because the present and future of technology lie in artificial intelligence, AI. And the foundation of AI is quantum computing. The U.S. wants its giants, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and OpenAI, to maintain a qualitative edge over Chinese companies in the AI race. No matter how much power it takes, this is crucial. Just understand this. To process any data from any computing machine, i.e., to get output, you need an incredibly powerful processor. The more powerful the processor, the more data you can process at faster speeds. But what are processors made of? They're made of semiconductor materials and contain circuits called transistors. These transistors are the ones that actually process the data. The more transistors there are, the more efficiently the processor can work. In 1971, Intel created the first microprocessor, which had 2,300 transistors. By November 2000, Intel launched the Pentium 4, which made waves with its 42 million transistors. When Apple introduced the M1 MacBook Air in 2020, its processor had 16 billion transistors. The MacBook 4, launched last year, has a processor with 28 billion transistors. And Nvidia, the American company that manufactures and exports AI chips, has a single product chip with 80 billion transistors. These numbers are so large, and each transistor is so small that it's almost impossible to imagine. But let me help you with an analogy. Think of the HB pencil that many of you have used at some point. A single line drawn by that pencil is about 200,000 nanometers thick. In comparison, The chip in the M4 MacBook processor is just 3 nanometers. Even in its larger size of 7 nanometers, it's still 28,000 times smaller than the line of an HB pencil. By the way, 3 nanometers doesn't mean every chip or transistor gate is exactly the same size. It means that while sizes may vary slightly, you can fit as many as 300 million transistor gates into 1 square millimeter. This is the cutting-edge technology of our time. This nanotechnology is the foundation of all future innovations. Whether you're building fighter jets, conducting a census, creating a new computer, or setting up a factory for family cars, or developing advanced surgical equipment, or launching a government safe city project. Without nanotechnology, you're stuck in the past, unable to compete. Processing data from around the world at super speeds and delivering results is impossible without it. Imagine one machine that can read 5 million pages per second and give you answers. Now compare it to another machine that can read 10 billion pages, analyze them, and deliver results in the same time. The second machine will undoubtedly provide better answers. This level of technology can only be achieved through a masterpiece of quantum physics, mathematics, and mechanical engineering. Today, Taiwan's TSMC, Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, leads the world in this field with American support. This is because America is also a global leader in quantum physics. That's why TSMC, despite being geographically close to China, operates under strict U.S. control. Even though it's just a stone's throw away from China, it doesn't sell advanced nanotechnology or the tools needed to produce it to China. Ironically, under the One China policy, TSMC should technically be a Chinese company since Taiwan is considered part of China. But as you know, history tells a different story. Taiwan operates as a sovereign island, largely due to American support. TSMC is the only organization in the world working on the smallest nanotechnologies. It produces 90% of the world's advanced chips. The company is now developing chips as small as 2 nanometers in semiconductor technology. The entire business of Apple's MacBook 4 and iPhones relies on 3 nanometer processors. That's why they say that if America loses Taiwan, it loses everything. In gaming consoles like Xbox and others, Nvidia's graphics rely on the same Taiwanese nanochip technology. Sony's PlayStation, Microsoft's Xbox, Tesla's self-driving cars, and processors from AMD and Nvidia all depend on the same company, TSMC. This is how TSMC dominates 90% of the market share. South Korea's Samsung and Dutch companies also work on nanochips, but none have surpassed Taiwan's TSMC. The U.S. has also banned Samsung and Dutch companies from doing business with China. You might wonder how the U.S. can force companies from other countries not to sell their products to certain buyers. The key point is that no country in the world can develop highly advanced technology entirely on its own. Developing next-generation technology requires assistance from many other supporting technologies. Similarly, companies and countries need buyers to sell their technology and secure their position. The U.S. has provided and continues to provide support to Taiwan in developing nanochips, and its biggest export market is America. As we mentioned earlier, companies like Intel, Apple, Google, Nvidia, and Microsoft all rely on TSMC. This is how the U.S. and its allies have prevented China from matching the computing power of American machines. The goal was to keep China permanently behind the United States in the field of artificial intelligence. But now, Chinese engineers have proven the age-old proverb true: wisdom prevails over everything. The U.S. took away China's access to computing power, specifically the advanced nano-powered machines. But the Chinese had wisdom. They wrote algorithms in such an ingenious way that they maximized the efficiency of their software. In other words, while America relied on computing power, China achieved similar results through efficient programming. Think of it this way. If you need to break rocks, but no one is allowed to sell you a hammer, or even the tools to make one, what do? You don't have a hammer, but you devise a brilliant method to get the job done. You develop the art of softening stone. Using your hands, you shape the stone into something that leaves everyone amazed. Now, the one who restricted the sale of hammers is left speechless. The one who imposed the ban is now in a dilemma. Should they learn from you or impose even more restrictions? Something similar has happened to America and its companies. Now, let's see what China has achieved in the field of AI following this example. DeepSeek, a low-cost AI startup, was launched in May 2013 with just a couple of hundred employees. It was founded by 37-year-old Liang Wenfeng, and initially, it didn't hold much significance. He and his team used open-source, freely available AI models, combined different models, and refined their algorithms. They innovated on existing methods. Currently, 8 out of 10 research papers on AI and computing are being written by Chinese students or institutions. These young researchers provided significant help as they were producing research papers in large numbers. U.S. sanctions prevented the DeepSeek team from accessing the latest processor technologies. So they started using older 7-nanometer processors. Although these processors had less computing power and speed, the team had brains and wisdom. Through pure genius, they created efficiency in this older system with their coding. Just before last Christmas, they launched the DeepSeek V3 model, similar to ChatGPT. It performed at nearly the same speed. Some IT circles in America took DeepSeek's achievement seriously, but most chose to ignore it. At the time, all major U.S. companies, including Meta, OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, and Microsoft, were working on a new AI model. This new model wasn't just about computing and producing results. It was designed to provide reasoning behind its outputs. ChatGPT called it the 3.0 model, and it was kept under wraps. The Americans downplayed the Chinese startup's achievement, showing no concern. They believed their new 3.0 model was beyond the reach of Chinese companies. They also assumed Chinese startups lacked the computing power to compete. But then, on the day U.S. President Donald Trump took office, China dropped a bombshell. They launched DeepSeek V3's thinking and reasoning model, R1. This was a game changer. U.S. companies and think tanks had done everything to prevent China from reaching this level and were confident in their efforts. But DeepSeek's achievement was astonishing. They trained their model in just 2 months. In contrast, American companies like ChatGPT took years to reach a similar stage, and that too with the advanced technology China didn't have access to. Meta spent $60 million to upgrade its thinking model, Llama 3, while DeepSeek achieved the same for just $6 million, 10 times less. Meta plans to spend an additional $60 billion to further train its language model. U.S. companies trained their models using supercomputers with 16,000 chips, but DeepSeek did it with just 2,000 older Nvidia chips. So, what makes this Chinese model so remarkable? Many of you have likely used OpenAI's ChatGPT 4.0 model. While it's helpful, it doesn't provide reasoning. A newer version, the 3.0 model, is being trained to include reasoning but hasn't been launched yet. DeepSeek, however, beat them to it by launching their thinking and reasoning model, R1, on the day President Trump took office. This was a revelation for investors who had poured billions into U.S. companies, betting on their future. Now, they began to question whether investing in Chinese startups might yield better returns compared to their massive investments in U.S. firms. This shift in sentiment caused shares of Nvidia, a key player in American nanochip technology, to plummet. The company lost $900 billion in market value in a single day. The decline in Nvidia's shares sent shockwaves through the U.S. AI startup ecosystem, leaving investors worried. The impact is still being felt, as this represents a paradigm shift, not just in technology, but also in global business dynamics. In politics, U.S. policies and sanctions have backfired, ultimately benefiting China. Chinese innovators found new, efficient ways to achieve results using less power, energy, and resources. To make matters worse for American companies, China has made DeepSeek's model open source and free. This means if American startups keep their models proprietary, China could dominate the global market. But if they open source their models, China could learn from them and advance their own startups even further. For those unfamiliar with open source, here's a quick explanation. Some programs have locked algorithms, accessible only to the company that owns them. For example, Apple's iOS system is exclusive to iPhones. No one else can access or modify it. On the other hand, open source software can be downloaded, modified, and used freely. DeepSeek's model is open source, meaning anyone can download it, feed it their own data, and process it offline. Imagine buying ChatGPT's image generator model, downloading it, and using it to create images not available on OpenAI's official system. You could essentially turn it into a local server, customizing it to produce images, videos, and other data as per your needs. Think of programming software like Python or the Linux operating system. Both are open source and can be used offline. DeepSeek R1 is similar, a thinking and reasoning model that's free and open source. In the Financial Times, OpenAI has accused the Chinese company of stealing their models. This is essentially an allegation of intellectual property theft, claiming that their design and model have been copied. Now, keep two things in mind. First, whether the allegation of intellectual property theft is right or wrong. The reality is that continuous innovation wins in the end. Second, once knowledge, technology, or even philosophy enters the market, there's no way to restrict its use or testing for personal or national benefit. How the world's biggest companies and nations have borrowed, adapted, or even stolen ideas from each other with the help of intelligence. In such cases, accusations fly, but what does it really matter? At the end of the day, the world will embrace the product that serves its best interests. What's cheap, efficient, and readily available will dominate the market. And the powerful will be those who can harness modern technology to their advantage. So, OpenAI's allegation holds some truth. DeepSeek's design and model are indeed very similar to ChatGPT. DeepSeek studied and updated similar open-source models to create its own. But remember, these models were open source to begin with. Anyone could purchase one for $270. What sets DeepSeek apart is that they've not only kept their model open source, but also made it free. Anyone can download it and build their own AI engine on a personal system or laptop to process vast amounts of data. While it doesn't yet feature an image generation system, that capability doesn't seem far off. That said, this story doesn't mean China has surpassed the US in AI. It simply means that, after years of sanctions, the US can no longer rely on the belief that controlling technology can hold China back in the AI race. This is now a head-to-head competition between China and America. Both are pushing hard to outdo each other in future technologies. To achieve this, they're equipping their people with advanced skills, and their youth are diving deep into quantum physics, mathematics, and AI. And the results are beginning to show.